Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I see lots of faces I know. Really good. Thanks for coming out. I know Virginia brought her class. Hi, Virginia's class. How you guys doing? Today was a really cool day for me. I released my first illustrated book. I've never done that before. And so today's presentation will be about the book itself and about the process of getting here to illustrate this book in the first place, because I think a lot of people would be interested in kind of the path that led me here. And then I'll just talk about the book and show off a lot of cool pictures and talk about why it was fun. So does this mic, is it sound good? Is it cutting in and out? Okay. Testing. Okay. You got to hold it pretty closely. Hi, Naomi. My daughter's here. Hi. Okay. Let me just stand over here for a second because it feels really powerful. Okay. All right. Making a Marvel Anatomy with Jonah Lobe. Who am I? I'm Jonah Lobe. And what do? I'm an impoverished freelance artist. And what are the various hats that I've worn over the years? 3D character artist for games, Skyrim and Fallout, some others that never got shipped and died. A concept artist. After my time at Bethesda, I moved on to concept art. For those not familiar, that's basically the field of art wherein you just visually invent lots of cool ideas for a movie team or a video game team. An illustrator, as of today. An art educator on YouTube. This is why I have my own camera and mic that I don't know how to use. And a writer. You know, not very successful at that yet, but we're getting there. It's important to be aspirational. Here's my socials. The only reason I put this up here, not that I expect everyone to suddenly scribble them down, but because social media has definitely been, in the last 10 years, a big way forward for me. And so I'm on my websites at the top, Twitter, Instagram, and my YouTube channel right there. I've always liked art. This is one of the first known recorded Jonah Lobe originals. As you can tell, I've always liked monsters a great deal. My first break into the industry, fast forwarding a little bit from the age of 2 to 22, was on the Shivering Isles, which is a company called Bethesda Softworks in Maryland, which is where I'm from. And I got in just in time to work on this game here. It was a lot of fun. Pay attention to the three-headed man. He comes back later. And then my first real full experience on a AAA game was Fallout 3. Fallout was a game that came out when I was a kid, and then Bethesda bought the rights, and we worked on that. And so I was a creature designer. I made lots of monsters, creatures, horrible-looking ghouls, monsters called death claws, which are my personal favorites. And I got to work on lots of giant irradiated insects, that kind of thing. And I think this was really when I started referencing science to create my art and realizing that I really could not do half as well on my own than if I was studying from reality. I also started experimenting a lot with combining creature DNA and musculature and bones with humans. And so this is a hairless bear with a skin problem. There's the death claw again. But in both instances, I started looking at things like lizards or bears or what have you, and then combining it with the structure of something else. Crab people and super mutants. Again, as you can see, I'm kind of pushing towards that direction and working on my modeling skills. And then the game that really took off for me and where I really kind of hit my stride was on Skyrim, which came out in 2011. And the big thing about those games, among many things, was the dragons, and I was fortunate enough to work on those. Got to work on some undead, and in doing so, got to reference a lot of human anatomy and trying to figure out, there's lots of different kinds of undead from all kinds of different kinds of shows and movies, but I wanted to create an undead that looked not grotesque and shambling, but something that looked like it was a warrior in life, and that it had dried out into leather and wood, basically. I wanted this. I really enjoyed this game because it was a world full of wonder and magic, and those are the kinds of things that really inspire me. And so creating things that were beautiful but unknowable really got me intrigued and really helped me submerge myself in that world. These are the undead again. I just show them because I'm really proud of them, and they're very grotesque. But I worked really hard on learning how to do 3D modeling, 3D sculpting, and 3D texturing, and I think being able to dive into those worlds really helped me in my understanding of sculpture as an art form, as well as color and color theory. This is the last boss of Skyrim. I gave myself tendinitis working on him because I had to just etch all those tiny little holes and all that. He was supposed to look a little bit like a dragon crossed with a meteorite, but I just had to cut away every tiny little divot, and I really regret it. But I did get to see my artwork on TV, which was really cool, in different ads. This was in the major release of Skyrim. These are from the couple years later, some expansion they were doing. And that was a cool moment for me. And it just shows how thin the veil is between being kind of just an ordinary schmuck and an ordinary schmuck whose work gets on TV. It turns out it's very little, and I had no part in it, and nor did I receive any money or kickbacks or anything. They didn't even tell me they were doing it. I just found out from my friend. This is the giant from Skyrim. Got to work really hard on him and teaching myself how to look at humans objectively, not just trying to create six-pack abs, big, brutish, scary creations. And to do that and to really try to humanize him as a character, I looked at farmers a lot and looking at the way that their hands are wrinkled and their skin is burned by the sun. And to make them extra relatable, I made them look like my dad. Who, the poor guy, got COVID 3 days ago, and he's currently standing outside of the bookstore by himself. Yeah, I know, it's very sad. Fallout 4 was the last game I worked on at Bethesda. I only worked on it for about 9 months before I left, but I definitely hit my stride as a sculptor. This is the Deathclaw again. This is called the Mirelurk King, and it's just, it was, yeah, I mean, listen, I really like gross, horrible things. I have no other really rationale for it, but again, in looking at these creatures and in trying to create them on my own, I did so much looking at real world things. And in a case like this, it was, frogs, amphibians, fish, the Dunkleosteus, which is an ancient fish that no longer is with us. And this is the Deathclaw. And it's literally, this is the last creature I made before I left Bethesda. I knew I was going to leave. I knew I was going to move here to New York and be with you wonderful people. But I knew that if they made the Deathclaw again without me, I would never feel good about myself again. So I did it at home, and then I brought it in, and I said, here it is, and they put it in the game. And so I'm very proud of this guy. He's my favorite monster that I've ever made. Once more, I want to just reference that how much I looked at real creatures in trying to design monsters, because you really cannot create something original and create something truly believable unless it's packed with the kind of information that you wouldn't necessarily think of. I think when we think crab, we think pinchers, we think hard shell, but how many of us can really visualize the texture of a crab underneath, or exactly the blade-like thinness of their legs, et cetera? It's the kind of thing we don't think about until we actually observe actively. And so on a creature like this, which is the Mirelurk, I did a lot of paying close attention, and I think it paid off. And so this definitely fed my desire to learn how to do scientific looking work. These are the super mutants. The idea here is they're giant, green, irradiated men who are super strong. But how do you do that without making them look like the Hulk? In this case, we made them look like they were thick and taffy-like. After that, I moved here to New York. I worked on my novel, and that hasn't got published yet. I worked on a game called Fireborn, it died. I worked on a game with Adobe for a year and a half, and I made a nice, pretty penny working on a game that also died. But this is where I really cut my teeth in the world of concept art. And so just generating concepts and ideas constantly, all the time. Ines, you know this inside out. And so this was a really extremely valuable learning opportunity for me. I think when you do concept art, your whole job is to generate ideas, most of which will be rejected. And I think in terms of cultivating a powerful artistic discipline, it's pretty great, because it really forces you to let go of your ego and to just focus on generating new ideas. I spent some time doing pen and ink artwork. Basically, I would challenge my Instagram audience to give me a word, and then I would just illustrate that word that day. It was called the Word of the Day series. And they were really fun. They helped me to tackle all kinds of things. And because I did them in real pen and ink, the goal for me, being a traditional digital artist, was to let go of the idea of perfection. Because when you're doing something in pen and ink, you are bound to mess up, and you basically just have to be okay with that. And so this was a huge lesson where I would start an idea in one day and finish it the same day. I also released a video course on creature design, which I sometimes teach in Virginia's class. Hi, Virginia. I made jewelry for a little while. That was fun. I designed it on the computer, and then we got it made. They're more than just 3D printed. I got them made with a jeweler here in the city. And those are the kinds of things that I was going to start selling a lot at Comic-Con. And then the funniest thing happened. COVID, and all of them got canceled. But all of it comes down to, for me, anatomy. I've realized that again and again and again, I keep coming back to the human body. And I do a lot of study of these things, often from photos, sometimes from my mind. And I just try to absorb as much information as I can, because it's one of those things where the more you study it, the more it sinks in. And you're invariably, when you study any part of the body or study any one given thing, you're going to forget 90% of it almost immediately. And so you just have to keep doing it again and again. I've also started working on things in 3D and really getting in there and sculpting and figuring out how the human body works. And I think it really has driven my interest in recent years, studying muscle and bone more in depth, because the more you study them, the more you realize, the more you understand just how they work. And you understand what an incredible machine the human body really is. The art test. It's so funny, I have no idea why it looks like that. I think that's called hurrying before your presentation. I was contacted by the publisher, this guy Chris Prince at Insight Editions, and he had been trying to make this book, Marvel Anatomy, for years. And I think he had shopped it around to Marvel 10 years ago, and they said, that sounds weird, no thank you. And then he shopped it around to DC, and DC said, sure, we'll do it. And the book did surprisingly well, and Marvel said, you know what, we'll do one. And so Chris had been following me on social media for a couple of years because of my work on Skyrim and Fallout, and that's how he knew me. And he contacted a few other artists at the time, but nobody really had either the interest or the kind of the weird cross-section of abilities. And so I was put on the scene, and they had me do an art test. I had never drawn a superhero ever. And so the art test in my mind was try to show them that I could do it. So I did 3 different characters. I did the Hulk, I did Carnage, and I did Wolverine. And I was like, wow, I nailed it. And they came back to me after the weekend, they said, no, that's not what we're looking for. And I was crushed. But ultimately what it came down to, it was an aesthetic choice. So the original DC Anatomy, as you can tell from the picture here on the front of the book, there's the Vitruvian Wolverine, based on Leonardo da Vinci's original illustration. So what they were going for was a kind of a weathered, brown kind of aesthetic. And it turned out if I just kind of shifted things slightly, it it became kind of much closer to what they wanted. So this was the part of the art test that finally did get me the job. And I was very relieved because I was desperate for money. Okay, this is not supposed to be like this. I don't know why that's coming in. Oh, you know what? I know why. There's a very special font called Neptune, which we used in the book. It's this really cool font here. It's supposed to look vaguely Wakandan. They don't have it on this machine. So we're getting weird. So I promise you, I'm not just fumbling with the keys every time. It looked much cooler. To research this and figure out what to do, the first thing you do is you got to dig deep and find resources that you can depend on. So these are some resources I've been using. These are two friends of mine that I've had since my Bethesda days. They've been of enormous help in just trying to figure out the human body, figure out anatomy. This is a classic book written, I think, in the 60s or 50s. It is a fantastic tome on how to draw human bodies, kind of from your imagination, from any angle. And this is more figure drawing. And then for this particular project, I already had this one here. This is classic. But for this particular project, I got this Atlas of Human Anatomy, which is apparently in use by basically every medical professional. And then I got this Strength Training Anatomy. And I figured, hello? Great, thank you. Oh, this is much better. I felt like I was having to talk into certain angles of it and hold it just right. And this, in dealing with superheroes, you're dealing with people with perfect bods all the time, and they're always flexing or stretching or flying, And so I figured something that involved a lot of cool poses where the muscles were really drawn out would be of help to me. I also needed to research as much as possible the characters, because in designing this book, I knew that even if I had not heard of the character, that they were somebody's favorite. Marvel fans, I don't know if you know this, Marvel's really big. And people really, really, really care about the source material. And so, Squirrel Girl, the lizard, Throg, who's basically Thor but a frog, Rocket Raccoon. I basically just went online and compiled a bunch of images from different artists, different scenes, and trying to figure out what is their most common outfit, and what is their best looks, and how could I kind of make sure that I was doing service to the original designs. And in some cases, I would pull pictures just for specific poses, that kind of thing. The process, God, this font is making me look bad. I think I mentioned this at the beginning. I've never illustrated a book before. I did not know what I was doing. And so I knew I needed to kind of figure out a process for this. So in my mind, the stages of the illustration were starting with thumbnail sketches. I spent just a couple weeks with a big Photoshop file and just divided up the file into basically pages opposite each other, so spreads in a book. And I just came up with really, really quick thumbnail sketches. And the idea here was to generate enough content that was different enough from itself that I wouldn't get bored of it, because when you're dealing with a bunch of perfectly bodied heroes flying and flexing and looking cool, it can get a little redundant if you don't kind of figure out what you're going to do differently every time. Then I went into a detailed sketch. Nothing very earth-shattering about this, but I would just try to go beyond just the gesture drawing and figure out more of the specifics of what I was going to illustrate. The line work, back in the day we would call this inks. Obviously this is all digital, but in this case I used the iPad and a special pencil to basically just draw all the line work. And something that I noticed about medical journals like Frank Netter's Atlas of Human Anatomy is it's very precise, right? It's not very sketchy, it's kind of very exact, and I think that's where a lot of the interest comes in. So in trying to create line work, I did what I almost never do, which is I just did nice, neat lines. Color, basic quick step, blocking it in with an emphasis on making sure that I got the specific colors of that hero right. And then shading, adding light and shadow, trying to make it look realistic. This was a lot of fun for me because it helps teach me how to become a better renderer and painter and illustrator, and to be able to do all that kind of from my mind. but it's also very time consuming. And then the last step was blending the image into the tone paper, kind of just integrating into the page to give the illusion that this is made of traditional materials, not digital. So here's some of the sketches from the book. And these are some of the preliminary, very, very easy ones. So as you can see in each of these spreads, there's 2 pages. And essentially I knew, because I had been given a manuscript, roughly how many words there were on the page and how much page space I had to work on. So I knew, based on the manuscript, how much room I had to take up. And so in some cases, I couldn't resist, and so I just filled the whole page with this, and then suffered the consequences later, because I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I really wanted to fill the space with, because Groot is so big and so cool. And so some things got sized up, some things got sized down, but this helped me generate a sense of kind of where I was going. There's Cyclops, Man-Thing, Marvel's Marvel's answer to Swamp Thing. Spider-Man, his various accoutrements, Venom. And then basically I went from rough sketch to detailed line work. And this stage itself doesn't necessarily look like too much, but I knew that if I generated a powerful, very deliberately precise set of lines, it would help me immeasurably down the road. There's Captain Marvel, and there's the line work behind her. And then this is a more, you can see more of the steps here. So this is the rough sketch for somebody like Cable, played by Josh Brolin in the movies. Then the line work, and then of course there was a part about his eye, and so I had a piece of his eye floating there, and he's got a time machine capsule in his arm, so I kind of just made that his bone. And the interesting thing about Cable is he's got this techno-organic virus that's eating him and consuming him, and as it crawls up his body, it converts his organics to machinery. And so I knew that would be the interesting thing on a page like this, and so I did a cross-section so you could see what everything looked like. There's the blocking of the colors, and then you begin the act of shading, and in this case, trying to shade skin is a little bit different from shading metal, and then you kind of keep adding on the details piece by piece. And so I worked very hard to come up with a workflow that was easily reproducible, and not just kind of paint willy-nilly, because I knew me, and I knew that I would very quickly fall into a hole that I could not crawl out of. So it needed to be a very deliberate set of steps, where even if I wanted to do more detail, maybe I'd get back to it later, but I really had to go through the 5 steps, finish, put it away, and then if I had time later, I could go back. This is just a GIF here of the same process being done for the Abomination. So you see the line work, you see the shading going in piece by piece. And it's really fun and really easy, actually, when you work with IP, intellectual property like this, because they already have a very powerful idea of what the character is, who they are, what their primary colors are. So in fact, a lot of the color decisions are made for you. And that could give me a really good sense of what are the 3 or 4 colors I will be using on that page. And of course, I'll be using more than just those, but it gives me a very powerful foundation for where I'm going to start. And it actually took away the decision-making for me in a very helpful way. And then, of course, I got to do it all in a really detailed way. And then just really get in there with all the little, all the things that ultimately, strangely enough, tragically enough, nobody will ever see but me. But that's the nature of working digitally. And my wife's a lawyer. She'd be very proud of me. I made an Excel spreadsheet to track my progress. I've never done this before, you guys. I'm not organized, but I really needed a system to figure out and every day, I remember walking home every day, just kind of in my own head being like, okay, if I only have 23 pieces of ink and I have 42 that have been painted, that only leaves me 3 weeks to do, just doing that arithmetic every single day. But it helped a great deal. The highlights. This is the fun part. This is where I just got to show off my work and talk about how much fun it was. The cover was super fun. Not much to say about that. It was just really fun. And also just the fact that I'm working with the Vitruvius Man from Leonardo da Vinci's designs. it just made it, it invited me to spend a little extra time on this step and get it looking like it was, there's ink and there's graphite and there's paint. It was a lot of fun getting that in and getting just all those little details. For those who don't know, Wolverine has his bones covered in metal, and I got to show off his bones without them, the bones with them. I even got to show off some of the musculature that drives his iconic blades out of his hands. These are the Skrull, and this is cool because they are going to be in the next iteration of the Marvel movies and shows. I see some heads nodding out there. It's called Secret War. They're going to play a big part. And I wanted to bring this up first because this is a really exciting moment for me because they let me invent a lot of things in this world. So for instance, these segmented pieces of bones, that was not canon until I just kind of came up with it because I figured they're shapeshifters. They need to be able to shapeshift on a just even a skeletal level first. And we even invented a word for it called osteotectonics. So this was really for me the moment where I realized, wow, working with Marvel could be really, really cool because they're actually really flexible. So I was really grateful for that. I came up with those osteotectonic bones splintered into lots of pieces, and then their musculature itself I made into much more like vine-like, ribbon-like pieces that can move and flex and change shape into sledgehammers or blades or what have you. I got to invent a lot of things. So, I was, again, guided by a manuscript written by this guy, Mark Sumerak, who's wonderful. And, but there was so much leeway for me to create on top of that. So this is a cross-section of Groot. Groot is a tree person. And basically this shows like the hard inner core, it's like a hardwood frame. There's the soft kind of bamboo-like interior. And then there's these dendrites, like vine-like plants that are movable. He can use to entangle people. They are they compose most of his body. And then I even made a little squirrel hiding inside of him. The Marvel fans went nuts when they saw that online. They're like, "What's that squirrel? Who's that squirrel? What's that squirrel's name? What's going on?" Guys, it's just a squirrel, you guys. And then Baby Groot, who's so famous now, I got to show just quickly little, how he grows little leaves and photosynthesizes and then kind of wakes up from his state into the Baby Groot that we all know and love. There is aspects of Marvel lore that are very famous, but that no one's ever delved into. How Wolverine got hit the metal on his bones. We've all seen Hugh Jackman plugged up with plugs and then coming out of the tub really angry and yelling and stabbing people. But we've never actually seen what goes on under the skin. And so I got to design these different steps here. And again, Marvel was very chill about the specifics. I got to be very artful sometimes, just to keep myself interested. I wanted to do more than just the characters themselves. So in a case like this, I showed the 3 stages of him, of his claws coming out just by giving him 3 arms, because I just wanted to see that. And in the case like with Vision, I just wanted to see him coming apart, because he's an artificial human. He's made from artificial parts. And I just thought it would be a cool visual, and I did it, and nobody said anything, and I kind of was like, okay, I'll just keep doing this. The Infinity Stone that's in Vision's head, we've always seen it as a little ball of light, but it's half crystal, half computer chip, and no one's ever just drawn it up close, and so I got to kind of design the look of what that would look like. I'm kind of looking at Art Deco designs and that kind of thing. I also got to design the Horton cells. Again, he's a synthetic human, so I got to design the cells that make up his body. And this definitely brought me back to 9th grade biology. Remember, Danielle? Oh, yeah. With a character like Mystique, I got to do basically the same thing. Again, go back to 9th grade biology. She's a shape changer as well, but then just do very different things for her. And so for her, I looked at chromatophores, which are the color-changing cells on octopuses, and basically use them as a model to create her design for her cells. And then these are the little color-changing cells on top. And those both are like what goes on in the cells of an octopus. But also they're inspired by, do you guys remember those thick pens that had all the different colors and you would click down? That's basically it. That's science, you guys. That's how Mystique works. Getting under the armor of Iron Man was really fun. And just designing, I decided I wanted to design like the kind of the chassis that kind of wraps around his body. And then, but there's other aspects, you know, in these later issues, he now has nanotech. So he doesn't have to like put on anything. His suit hides in him. There are these little nanites that hide in holes in his bones, and then they come out and form around him when he calls them. No one's ever drawn those nanites before, so I got to design them. And I even got to put together like the look of this diagram here of how these little beings come out. I designed them to look like red blood cells when they're all folded up, so they could most easily travel up through his bloodstream. Here they are hiding in little vacuoles in his bones, and they come up through the veins and up through the tissues and all that. And then when they come up to the top, they come up to the surface past the skin cells, and then they start to form their tiny little cities. That is basically comes down to, that is Iron Man's armor. Other tech, it's not just anatomy in this book, I got to design other tech as well. So this is the inside of Cyclops' visor. Cyclops can shoot lasers out of his eyes. And I wanted to show the inside workings of that. And so I got to do a cutaway. And some of this is based on kind of classic illustrations that have been done 30, 40 years ago, but then I just kind of upped their sexiness a little bit and tried to make them a bit more kind of modern looking. Not just tech, I got to look at some other objects in the world. Thor, otherwise known as Ryan Hemsworth, his helm, is that right, the Hemsworth brother? Hemsworth? But it's Chris Hemsworth. There's like 7 of them. I got to design like the different parts that compose Mjolnir, his hammer. Thanos, Josh Brolin again, and basically getting to design a human-like anatomy system with his own veins and his own muscles that are based on human muscles but are just not. And in a case like this, I got to basically treat his veins. I first applied them in the sketch as if they were kind of almost like tribal markings or patterns, and then made them look organic, because I didn't want them to look purely utilitarian. I wanted them to look scary. And then just being able to deal with these, with so many iconic characters from the series, X-Men, when I was little, had a huge crush on Jean Grey. And so I knew she's the most powerful psionic mutant in the entire universe. And so I wanted to convey that personality and that that strength and that weight by having her being one of the few characters in the book who looks directly at you. And then I got to visualize like the different things she can do in these kind of models. So this is her reaching out and mimicking somebody, mimicking their emotions. This is her entrapping them. This is her attacking in many different ways. And this is her binding, etc. That was a cool moment. I had this comic book. I only had a couple of comic books when I was little. My parents didn't really get me comic books or video games, and look what happened, Mom. But one of the only comics I ever had was this one with Venom and Ghost Rider. And I mean, how cool is this? This is a shot from inside of Venom's mouth out. It really, I mean, as somebody who likes monsters, it really blew my mind at the time. And so being able to then design Venom and show basically what does Eddie Brock look like when he's inside Venom was very cool. I pioneered, that sounds so grandiose. No, I'm gonna go with it. I pioneered this look, which is like basically his eye cells, his ocular cells, so the ones that are right over here. And the idea being that they bend light from this long slitted eyes, they bend that into his eyes so that Eddie Brock can see like 270 degrees when he's Venom. I also came up with the fun fact. I just was like, what if he can smell and breathe through his tongue? And Marvel was like, okay. Yes. Ghost Rider from the comic book before. My mom can attest, I used to draw lots of like skulls and things like that when I was little, and so being able to just draw a man's face burning off of his skull was like a really high point in this for me. The best designs, though, in the book, I think, were the ones that had the goofiest origins. This is Leader, and this is Leader's brain, and he just has this really silly aesthetic, which, you know, some later artists in the series tried to rectify that by changing the head shape and making him look more cool and normal. But I just felt like no, like we have to go with the traditional because it's just way too fun. With big brains, this is M.O.D.O.K, mental organism designed only for killing, played by Patton Oswalt, and I got to design him in a really fun way, and again, just really diving in and indulging in my worst desires. A pretty great moment, and just getting all up in there. This is Jocasta. She was the one character I did not know who she was. This is her origin story. She was made to be the wife of Ultron, which is, yeah. And I felt so like this was, I kind of felt like this was such a silly design. She has metal hair, and I just thought that a robot with metal hair, every time she turned her head, would just be like clang, clang, clang. And it didn't make sense to me. And also I just thought, what does a robot need metal hair for? But then I came up with this idea. First of all, I shortened it and gave her they're more like horns. But then I decided, what if her brain just filled up the entire space? And so I referenced a lot of Soviet-era radio equipment and sensors and that kind of thing, because she has a lot of sensors and microphones and that kind of thing and processing power. And I came up with the idea that what if her hair is just all brain? And again, Marvel was like, okay. There's Sandman, going from melty sand to glass to normal to dry sand. And I guess wonder where I got that idea. Don't tell Marvel, though, because they'd have a lawsuit on their hands. I'll just go through the last couple here, because I know we're running out of time and I want to leave some time for questions. Man-Thing, super fun. He's just a pile of swamp matter that is animated, and so I got to draw this little snake coming out of his arms, and he's got skeletons and bones, and basically his root structure is just a chaotic mix of roots, and just showing off the intersection of his body, what are the layers like. Rocket Raccoon, I love animals. I really, really love animals. Raccoons are both really cute and very scary. And so being able to give that to Rocket, voiced by Bradley Cooper, and being able to also show, Rocket used to be just a service animal that was for people who needed companionship, basically. And then he was forcefully operated on, like the island of Dr. Moreau. And so I got to show off how his pelvis and his collarbones were altered so that he could stand upright, walk on two legs, and carry all his big, heavy guns. And then just the whole point of making an anatomy book of Marvel superheroes is basically just so you can draw the Hulk in all those beautiful muscle fibers, and just draw a guy who just goes to the gym every day. And then the last element here I really want to touch on is this book is written by T'Challa, Black Panther, and his sister Shuri. And so I knew going into it that I wanted this whole book to appear as if it was a Wakandan take on Marvel. So this is not like a Marvel take with a Wakandan flair. It is from Wakanda, and is basically looking at all the other characters through a Wakandan lens. And so I went, and for 2 months, I just searched online and on social media for especially Afrofuturist artists, trying to find somebody who just really had the perfect blend of design sensibility and a deep appreciation for pop art, as well, not pop art, contemporary art, as well as a strong understanding and appreciation for traditional African design. I found Salim Busuru, and he was perfect right off the bat. His style was more cartoonish than mine. He was more doing comics, but his knowledge of both traditional African design and his enthusiasm and desire to make it mainstream again and make it modern was basically unlike almost anything I'd seen online. There's one other guy I can think of, this guy Jerice, who's spectacular. But I didn't meet him until later, and Salim just was the perfect guy. So Salim lives in Nairobi. We got online, we talked, we hit it off completely, and he just seemed to get it right away. And so I sent him an art test to see if he could kind of handle some of these elements, and he really did the research. He found both traditional African art and design and paired it with lore. And he iterated, and he showed me. I told him, I was like, show me the paper trail of like what you're looking at, because I want to show this off to the world and everything. And he really just did all the work needed. And so he came up with these designs, and these are for the chapter illustrations. So for every chapter in the book, there's 9. There is this mask, because I'm a big fan of masks, as my mom knows. I like to collect them over the years. And then masks are completely integral to superheroes. Every superhero has a mask. And so I knew I wanted these throughout, and so I gave him this assignment, and he just knocked it out of the park. And again, he did the homework, and he came up with these ideas. These are the characters that were going to be in that chapter. These were the cultural reference he used. In this case, he used a figurine used to hold the spirit of an ancestor, and in this chapter, this is mystical abilities. There's Man-Thing and Ghost Rider. And he came up with this idea, and then he generated this content and created a completely original mask. And then with his permission, basically I did a little digital touch-up to make it look like we were the same person, with the same artist. And I basically just make it a little bit more realistic and a little bit more rendered to make it kind of fit in. And I really wanted every one of these pages to be this, like, you turn the page, you're confronted by a mask, and you're just like, wow. And especially because he shouts out the heroes that are in that chapter. So in this case, it's Man-Thing, and they got their very distinctive kind of 3 tendrils hanging down, and then Ghost Rider with the glowing eyes. And he just nailed it again and again. And so he just did it, and so I hope that people really see that and respond to it. We also created basically we started talking about and referring to as a Wakandan QR code, and he came up with this. There's a system of cloth patterns and symbols called the Adinkra system. And it's non-religious. It's just kind of this loose, very traditional system. And just one of the very, very, very many symbols looks a lot like this one. And it means basically the quest for knowledge. And using that single one, Salim and I both created an entire alphabet of things that we would use to then classify all the characters. So that in the book, you have each character has this kind of unique Wakandan QR code, and in some cases it has had fun with it. Like Colossus can turn into metal, and so the last one turns metal, and then Nightcrawler can warp, and so his special ability symbol goes flying off. Hulk turning green, Groot growing a plant, the Invisible Woman, it disappearing. It's not every page, it's just there throughout. It's little jokes that we could tell then to the audience, but we thought it'd be fun. And that's the book. So what's next? I don't know. We'll see. But thank you.